So welcome to part 2 of my Keg scale project. It has been more than 9 long months since I recorded the videos associated with part 1 of this Keg scale project. If you watched part 1, when I last recorded, I was thinking about adding another component to the scales that I had put in this Keg and I did that. That component was a fingerprint reader. For the most part, it went very well. At first, I ordered one out of China, and I did not get the Chinese one to work, so then I ordered one out of from Adafruit. It was considerably more expensive, but it worked great right out of the box. And the intent of the fingerprint reader was that if I saw beer weights changing, but I had not scanned my finger, I would know that somebody was drinking my beer or stealing my beer. And I put that in there, and it worked fine, and the scales were working fine. Everything was going so great that I just never got around to recording another segment about the Keg scales to show you what I had done with the fingerprint reader. And then a couple months after that, my Keg scales completely broke down. And what happened, if you watched part 1 about the scales, the Keg I'm quite sure I bought it in 1983, right after I got out of college, one of my first investments. So it's coming up on 40 years old, and it's old and it leaks. I've added a little door hasp to it to help with the leakage, because I'm now using it as a fermentation chamber. But I got so much condensation inside of this kegerator that it flooded the scales out and they quit working. I didn't know that right away because you've got 3 kegs of beer going. So I waited until I finished all 3 kegs of beer, ripped those out, and saw what happened to the scales. And I decided, okay, I need to do something different. So I thought about doing a complete rebuild of this kegerator. And I thought about, it's almost 40, and I really don't want to spend a lot of time and money in something that may break down as soon as I finish rebuilding it. So after careful consideration, I decided to move to a keezer. A keezer is a kegerator made out of a chest freezer, also controlled by an inkbird. So I decided that if I was going to build this keezer, I needed the right environment to put the keezer into. If you look back on the first video, you can just see where this was sitting in my garage as it is now, but it wasn't the best environment for brewing and drinking beer. So I decided that I needed to change the environment before I built the keezer, and that's why everything has taken 9 months. So let's get back into the Keg scale project, where you can see what happens when an IT geek retires and then COVID hits and he has way too much time on his hands. Welcome to my brew pub. My brew pub is affectionately named Dragon Slayer Brewery, and you can find me at dragonslayerbrewery.com. I built it, because I had to move out of that kegerator and move to a keezer, and I wanted to have a nicer environment for brewing my beer and serving my beer. So we've doctored it up a little bit with the dragon theme that I have in my office, and I'll carry it out to the brew pub as well. So this is my keezer. As you can see, I've got my logo from my website on a pub table I slapped together, and also on the keezer itself. We're running 6 taps. I'm running it all off of one 5-pound CO2 tank with 4 regulators, 1 primary and 3 secondary regulators. The secondaries, 2 of them, really run 3 kegs each, and the third one is in case I want to put a beer at an odd pressure, like 30 pounds, to speed carbonate it to get it ready to drink sooner than later. I did carry over the fingerprint reader, but I added a little bit more functionality to it besides just knowing did I consider the kegs open or not? So if I scan myself in, I turn the light green. I also turn on the brew light, and I also turn on the TV and the LED lights for the keezer. I let the Dragon's Eye flash once in a while just because I think it's a cool feature to have that blink once in a while. It's red when the kegs are closed. So the TV displays what I've got on tap. I'm currently putting 5 beers on tap. One of them is currently being speed conditioned on the CO2 right now, so it's not ready to drink yet. But the other 4 are ready. Now I only have 3 scales in this keezer. The 3 scales that I originally had in the keezer have been carried over, although completely rebuilt. I had the problem with the moisture that got into the kegerator from the condensation, completely flooded it out. So I will show you how I've rebuilt them coming up. And I'll show you the other components that I put into this keezer, and we'll take a walk around it and look inside of it as we dig into this thing a little bit further. Okay, so let's start looking at some of the components that we have to the brewery. There's the Dragon light that I put in that's controlled by an ESP8266, simple on-off, so an LED light, so I'm not running too much voltage through an ESP8266. I put up a TV to display what beers do I have on tap. I periodically do flip to my latest images from my security cameras so that when I'm brewing I can see what's going on. So you can see at the top, I do know, the total beer consumed today, 3.5 pounds, which equals 3.5 pints. So it's a pints a pound the world around. So I can keep track of it by pounds or beers, however you want to view it. So I've got my Delight or Dragon's Lair Light. He's got 31.3 pounds left in that keg. My pumpkin spice porter, he's been, on tap since 11/17. We're in December now. So he was, there really for Thanksgiving, and now he still has 13.6 pounds left. The Russian Imperial Stout, is gonna go empty, I think, with the next pour that I make. So he is really, getting near the end. And then the other 3 keg spots, I don't yet have scales on, and we will get into those scales since that's what this video is really all about. The TV, I'm driving with a Raspberry Pi. So there's a Raspberry Pi back there behind it. And really then it's just showing web pages that are keeping track of what do I have on which tap and whatnot. There's also a Chromecast back there in case I would want to switch to normal TV to watch, a Packer game. And then there's also an Arduino back there. Again, it's an ESP Duino, so that it has Wi-Fi. And then he's really controlling this IR transmitter to be the remote for the TV. So that's what's going on with him. Let's move to the keezer itself. Okay, so here we're looking at the back of our keezer. So starting at the top, I have the temperature sensor. I have 2 temperature sensors associated with this keezer. The one on the outside is being monitored by an ESP, ESP Duino on the inside to control the garage temperature. If my garage gets too cold, I live in Wisconsin where it gets very cold, I automatically kick on the garage heater so that my pipes won't freeze when I'm in beer brewing season. And then I've got another temperature sensor inside the coffin or the top here of the keezer so that I know the temperature all the way up to where the taps are. And you'll see why that comes into play. So I do have quite a few wires running inside of that keezer. So here's the actual power cord for the keezer. I have a power sensor on it, so I know when and how long the keezer is running, just so I can monitor my energy consumption as I make any modifications or changes. Am I using more energy or less energy? So that's also running on a ESP Duino, so that can report that back to my host. I've got an ink bird that is keeping the keezer close to 38 degrees, which the temperature I like for serving beer. This is the controller for the LED light strings. The whole thing is running 2 LED light strings. So these are boxes that I made. So you just have an extension cord going in and then coming out with a pigtail. And then inside of these boxes are ESP8266 relay switches. So this one controls a fan inside of the keezer that blows cold air up into the coffin, so I can regulate the temperature all the way to the tap by running that fan or not running the fan. And this one runs this plug, which is really just running the LED lights. So to turn the LED lights on and off, and to turn the fan inside the keezer on and off. And then these are powering ESP Duinos. I've got one inside the keezer right now to run the 3 scales, and I'll be adding another ESP Duino to run the other 3 scales as we get those built and ready to be deployed, which I'll show you before I put them in the keezer. Okay, here's what you're looking at for the inside of the keezer. As you can see, I can fit in the 6 kegs pretty readily. The drip tray is really just running down to a Pepsi bottle that I can rinse out periodically and dump, which is fine. I don't hardly get any real runoff with the system going right to glasses. And then I've got crammed in here my CO2 tank and the regulators. So the primary regulator on the tank itself, and then 3 secondaries to control the pressure to the kegs. I have a dry rid in there to keep any condensation down so I don't have future problems with scales. Underneath the regulators, I have a gallon of water, and I've got the temperature probe for the Inkbird hooked up to the gallon of water, so I'm really measuring a more accurate temperature than just the ambient air temperature in the keezer. And underneath there is also where you've got ESP Duinos to control the scales, and I'll be adding another one underneath there to control 3 other scales. So let's go look at what we've got going on with these scales. Before we go look at those scales, I wanted to add one more thing that I built into the keezer, and that would be related to the fingerprint reader. So it's set up so that it can read a number of my fingers, and I also have my wife's fingers in there just in case she would ever decide to come have some beers. But something could go wrong. I could, the fingerprint reader could break, or my finger could get cut off, and I wouldn't want to not have access to my beer. So for that, we just built it in so you can say, "Hey Google, turn the taps off."
Okay, I turn the taps off.
Simple as pie. Okay, so let me show you what I've got going with my scales now. Obviously, I've told you 3 are out in the keezer, watching the 3 kegs on the far left, and I'm just finishing building up 3 more to handle the 3 kegs on the right. I have struggled mightily with these 3 scales. I had my friend Rick come over, who's an electronics genius, and combined we came up with, we believe I received a bad batch of whether it was the load cells or probably more likely the concentrators or amplifiers, but we could not get those to work. And the ones that I do have working here, a big problem that I ran into, these should work on either 3.3 or 5 volts, but these 2 particular ones that I've got ready to deploy are only working at 3.3 volts. So I've tied them both into a single 3.3 pin on the ESP Duino. So it takes plenty of work to put one of these together, so I don't do any unnecessary steps. I have the brackets that I got from my friend Rick, who has a 3D printer. I talked about those in part 1 of the video. You put these on here. In this case, I've labeled them. So your A plus, your A minus, your E plus, and your E minus. So you've got your white wires between these, black wires between those, and all your red wires run back to your amplifier or concentrator. I didn't even bother to, cut any of the wires to length. I just take what they ship me, solder the ends together, hot glue them down. And I also talked to my friend Rick about, hey, I said, what if I just swamp this thing in hot glue, because it's going into the bottom of a keezer, which could get, condensation problems like my kegerator had. Is it okay to cover it with hot glue? And bottom line, he believes it is, but he turned me on to this liquid tape. So I've coated it in liquid tape, front and back, to potentially stave off any problems that I would have in there. So I'll have 3 of these, just like I have 3. I've already got 3 just like this that are deployed. I'll be doing these last 3, getting them hooked up, deployed into that keezer. And while I thought that would finally be the end of my whole pub room build and getting scale, which all started with just scales under my kegerator, I thought about another thing I could add to this project. So we'll see. There may end up being a part 3 of this. Otherwise, if you decide to put scales underneath your kegs so you can keep track of your beer, I wish you all the luck. If you send me comments, I'll do my best to help you out or answer what I can. But it is really nice knowing what the weight on those kegs is. So good luck with your project. Let me know how you do. Thanks.